The stranger at the roadhouse. It was just after sunset when the sky turned from gold to ash, and the open highway shimmered under the last light of the day. KeanuReeves was riding his custom-built motorcycle, the one he'd spent months working on in his garage. Not for a film, not for show, just for the quiet. The roar of the engine was like a heartbeat, steady and calm, and the wind against his face reminded him that he was still real. After days on set, smiling for cameras, signing autographs and pretending to be someone else, this was his truth. Solitude, motion, silence. He pulled into a roadhouse just off Route 17, the kind of place where the neon buzzed louder than the jukebox and the air smelled of grease, spilled beer, and cigarette smoke. It wasn't a place where people asked questions. It wasn't a place where celebrities came either. That was part of the appeal. Keanu parked his bike near a row of others, massive Harleys with skull stickers and flame decals. He nodded respectfully at the machines before walking in. He didn't wear anything flashy, just a dark hoodie, worn jeans, and black boots. His helmet tucked under his arm. He could have been anyone. That was the point. The bar was dim, crowded, and humming with the tension of stories being told too loud. There was laughter, sharp and edgy. A pool table clacked in the corner. The bartender barely looked up when Keanu took a seat at the far end. "What'll it be?" the man grunted. "Just water," Keanu said softly. That earned him a slow, almost mocking glance, but the bartender poured the drink without a word. Keanu sat there sipping slowly, staring at nothing. His mind wandered to the letter he still hadn't opened in his saddlebag. From someone named Jessica. Her handwriting was familiar in a way that made his heart ache, but he wasn't ready to read it yet. Maybe tonight, maybe not. And then, the silence broke. "Look what the wind dragged in." A thick voice boomed from behind. Keanu didn't turn. He could feel the tension coil in the air like a spring. Some Hollywood type with soft hands and fancy boots. Keanu turned slowly. 3 bikers stood a few feet away. Tall, broad, and loud. The leader was a bear of a man with a tangled beard, tattoos creeping up his neck, and a leather vest that barely held together. The name patch read Rex. The second one had a mohawk and a steel chain wrapped around one arm. The third, silent and lean, was flipping a knife between his fingers with quiet menace. "Not looking for trouble," Keanu said, his voice even. "Oh, I'm sure you're not," Rex said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "But trouble tends to find soft boys who walk into our bar without an invite." Keanu set his glass down and stood. Not fast, not slow, just steady. "I'll leave," he said. "Didn't mean to disturb anyone." "Too late for that," Mohawk growled, stepping closer. The bar fell into a hushed whisper. Regulars leaned back, watching with the kind of anticipation only fear and fascination could birth. Some recognized him. Others didn't care. Out here, names didn't matter. Only strength did. Keanu's eyes flicked to the bartender. No help there. The man looked away. "You talk like a school teacher," Rex mocked, stepping in until they were nose to nose. "You think just because you're famous you can walk in anywhere? Think again." Keanu took a deep breath. "I'm not here as an actor." "Then who the hell are you?" Keanu didn't answer. Instead, he took a single step back, not in retreat, but in warning. His eyes, once calm, sharpened like a blade drawn in silence. "You've got 3 seconds to step back," he said softly. The knife in the third biker's hand paused in mid-flip. "What if I don't?" Rex growled. "Then I'll teach you, something your fists never could." The silence that followed felt like a string stretched tight across a canyon. Rex lunged. What happened next didn't look like a fight. It looked like water moving around stone. Keanu sidestepped the punch, his body low and centered, and used Rex's own momentum to flip him over with a brutal yet effortless sweep. The big man crashed into a table, splinters flying. Mohawk roared and swung the chain, but Keanu ducked, stepped in, and with 2 precise strikes disarmed him. The chain clattered to the floor. The lean one hesitated, knife halfway raised. His eyes met Keanu's. Keanu didn't blink. The knife dropped. Everything stopped. The bar was frozen. Someone dropped a glass. A jukebox flickered and died. Keanu turned, picked up his helmet and walked toward the exit. No words, no taunts, just quiet strength. But just as he reached the door, a hand clutched his jacket. It was Rex, blood at his lip, fire in his eyes. "You don't walk away from me," he hissed. Keanu turned around, calm as ever. "You don't know what you just started," Rex said, dragging himself up. "You have no idea who we are." Keanu paused, then nodded. "Maybe not, but maybe you've got no idea who I am either." And with that, he walked out into the night. As he drove away, headlights cutting through the darkness, a phone call was made inside the bar. A whisper passed through the ranks of the biker gang. Not about revenge, not yet, something deeper, something older. The name KeanuReeves echoed in a different tone now. One of awe, one of fear. But someone wasn't ready to let it go. Someone who owed a debt to Rex. Someone who remembered Keanu from another life. And she was coming. The storm hadn't even started yet. Whispers from the past. The desert air was dry and sharp the next morning, slicing through the sky like broken glass. KeanuReeves rode with his face half hidden behind his helmet's visor, the road stretching out like an old scar ahead of him. The roadhouse was miles behind now, but what had happened inside it was not so easily left behind. He could still hear the sound of the table breaking under Rex's weight. He could still feel the pressure of their eyes, curious, angry, silent, and stunned. It wasn't just the fight. It was something deeper, something Keanu hadn't let himself feel in years. He stopped by a rundown gas station just outside a ghost town called Miller's Rest. He wasn't low on fuel, but he needed a pause. Something about the silence in the desert made it easier to think. He took off his helmet and leaned against the pump, staring out at the endless dust. For a moment, he reached into the saddlebag and pulled out the letter again. The envelope was crinkled now, the corners worn. The name Jessica was still scrawled in soft cursive ink on the front. He knew who she was. He knew why she'd written, but he hadn't opened it yet. Before he could, a familiar sound buzzed in his ear. An old motorcycle engine. It wasn't loud or aggressive, but it had a particular chug like a heartbeat with something broken inside. He turned his head just slightly. An old Triumph bike pulled into the station, kicking up dust. The rider wore a dark brown leather jacket, hair tucked under a vintage helmet with red racing stripes. As she pulled off the helmet, Keanu's breath caught. It was her. It was Jessica, and she looked like she hadn't aged a day since the last time he saw her. Back when they were both nobodies. Back when she called him the quiet hurricane. She didn't smile. She didn't wave. She just parked beside him and got off the bike slowly, like she'd rehearsed every move in her mind before making it. "Been a long time," she said, voice low, steady. Keanu nodded. "Too long." There was a silence between them that wasn't awkward. It was heavy, like the kind of silence that carried weight because it knew too much. "I saw the videos," she said. "Someone at the bar filmed it. You took down Rex in our 6 seconds." Keanu looked away. "I didn't go there to fight." "You never do," she said. "But trouble still finds you." He didn't answer. Instead, he handed her the letter from his bag. She took it, surprised. "I didn't open it," he said. "Didn't know if I should." She looked at it, turning it over in her hand. Then, she laughed softly. "You're still the same. Always carrying things too long. Always waiting for the right time. The perfect moment." Keanu's voice was quiet. "Maybe because last time I didn't wait, and everything broke." Her smile faded. "It wasn't your fault. Wasn't yours either. But it broke anyway." They stood there for a while, the wind picking up dust and time around them. Then she stepped closer. "I didn't come just to see you," she said. "I came to warn you." Keanu's brow furrowed. "About Rex?" She nodded. "You embarrassed him. In front of his chapter, in front of the chain lords." Keanu blinked slowly. "I thought he ran that crew." "Not anymore. Not since the night you flipped him through a table." Someone else stepped up. Someone who's been waiting to take you down for years. Keanu tilted his head. Who? She hesitated. Her jaw tensed. His sister. And you already know her name. Keanu's stomach sank. He did know the name. Lara. Years ago, she was a student at the same dojo where Keanu trained in private. She was brilliant, fast, fierce. She had a rage in her that frightened even the teachers. She disappeared after a violent incident. No one ever said what really happened. Rumors floated around. Keanu remembered being told to never bring her up again. She was there that night, Jessica continued. She watched the video, she saw the way you moved. It woke something in her. She's rallying the others, not just bikers. People from the underground fights, martial artists who follow her, people who don't care about fame. They care about power, about proving something. Keanu stared into the distance, mind racing. Through faces and names he thought he'd forgotten. I didn't want any of this, he said. Doesn't matter, Jessica replied. She's already set things in motion. They're calling it a challenge. They want to break the black belt who made their leader bleed. Keanu looked at her. So what now? You do what you always do, she said. You walk into the storm. But this time, you won't be alone. He opened his mouth to respond, but before he could speak, a loud rumble cut through the silence. 6 bikes pulled into the gas station lot, all matte black. No license plates, no logos, just symbols carved into the tanks. A red fang, a burning fist, a broken eye. Riders wore dark helmets and their movements were synchronized. Too clean, too sharp for a random group of bikers. One of them stepped forward. Helmet still on. He dropped a small black envelope at Keanu's feet. No words. Then the riders turned and drove away as quickly as they had come. Keanu bent down and picked it up. Inside was a single note. You have 7 days. 1 fight. No rules. No cameras. You know the place. There was no name, but there didn't need to be. He looked at Jessica. She's not just challenging you, Jessica said. She's hunting you. Keanu stared at the note, the words etched in clean, deliberate ink. Then he folded it, tucked it into his jacket, and looked at the sky. 7 days, he whispered. The countdown had begun, and behind the desert sun, something ancient stirred. Shadows of the dojo, the desert stretched endlessly before him, a canvas of silence broken only by the hum of the engine beneath him. KeanuReeves rode with purpose now, his back straighter, his hands firmer on the throttle. The wind no longer whispered peace, it whispered warning. It carried echoes of the past, names he hadn't heard in years. Memories he thought he'd left buried beneath the dust of old training mats and forgotten promises. He wasn't riding aimlessly anymore. He knew exactly where he was going. 200 miles east of the gas station, hidden beyond a crumbled sign and a long-forgotten trail, was an abandoned dojo carved into the cliffs of Echo Canyon. It had once been a sacred place, a sanctuary of discipline, humility, and philosophy. Here Keanu had trained when he was still finding himself, before fame, before films, before the world called him a hero. This place had no cameras, no autographs, no applause. Only sweat, silence, and the sound of breath meeting gravity. It was also the last place he had seen Lara. He remembered it now in fragmented flashes. Her intensity, her hunger to be the best. The way her eyes lit up not in joy, but in competition. They had sparred once late at night after the others had left. She moved fast, struck hard, and didn't hold back. Neither did he. It wasn't personal then. It was pure technique, pure form. But something inside her cracked that night when she lost. She didn't speak a word afterward. She left the next morning without looking back. And now, years later, she wanted a rematch. Not in honor. In vengeance, Keanu reached the hidden road near dusk. The sun bled across the rocks like a wound, casting long, sharp shadows that moved like spirits between the cliffs. He parked his bike beside an old boulder, partially covered in ivy. The path was narrow, steep, and winding, but he walked it with the quiet confidence of someone returning home. The air grew colder as he descended into the crevice, until he finally saw it. Still there, still standing. The dojo, the wooden structure, had weathered time and storm. Its red-brown walls were faded, its roof partially collapsed, but the core remained. The front doors, wide and firm, still bore the hand-painted kanji symbols for truth and discipline. Keanu stepped inside. The air was thick with dust, but the energy was unmistakable. His footsteps echoed on the wooden floorboards as he moved past the torn paper walls and broken racks where bamboo swords once hung. In the center of the room, the training mat remained, torn, cracked, but still sacred. He stood there in silence, letting the ghosts rise around him. Suddenly, the door creaked behind him. He turned. It wasn't Lara. It was the master. Master Yuto. The old man looked impossibly thin, his back curved like a question mark. His hair had turned fully white, tied in a small knot, but his eyes were still sharp, piercing even in the dim light. "I thought the wind carried your name too far to return," Yuto said in a dry, raspy voice. Keanu bowed deeply. "I didn't know if I deserved to." "Deserve?" The master chuckled. "Deserve has nothing to do with truth." Keanu looked around. This place, it's still alive. Barely, like an old warrior waiting to be needed again. Keanu's gaze darkened. "I didn't come to train. I came to prepare." "Same thing," Yuto said simply. "You came because someone is calling you to a different kind of war." Keanu hesitated, then nodded. Yuto walked slowly to the edge of the mat and sat, motioning for Keanu to join him. "Lara was always the most talented," the master said, "but she had fire without balance, ambition without stillness. She could break anyone except herself." "She hasn't changed," Keanu replied. "She's only become stronger and colder." Yuto sighed. "She became a warrior without a path, and that is the most dangerous kind." Keanu leaned forward. "She wants a public challenge. No rules, no mercy. Then you must train like the man you once were, not the man the world sees now." Keanu nodded. "I don't want to hurt her." "You won't," Yuto said. "But you may need to break her illusion." Keanu stayed at the dojo that night. He swept the floors. He rebuilt part of the rack. He found his old GI in the back room, dust-covered, but intact. He lit incense not for tradition but for clarity. And when the stars filled the canyon sky, he stepped onto the mat barefoot, feeling the cool wood beneath his feet. His movements were slow at first, then faster, then a blur. Each strike, each block was not for the camera. It was not for ego. It was for survival, for truth. For the quiet part of him that had always known violence wasn't about rage, it was about control. He practiced until dawn, until sweat soaked through his clothes and the first light cracked, the sky like a secret. And then, just as he finished a final kata, a soft sound reached his ears. Clapping. From the doorway, Jessica stood, arms folded, watching. "You still move like you're trying not to be seen," she said. Keanu breathed. "Out." Because sometimes being seen is the real danger. She stepped in, handed him a bottle of water. "We've found out where the fight is happening." "Where?" "An old arena in Pine Ridge. Underground cage fights. Private, guarded, no police, no press. Just blood and rules made in whispers." Keanu nodded. Jessica hesitated. "You know she won't stop, right? Even if you beat her again." "Then maybe it's not about stopping her," he said. "Maybe it's about showing her what she's become." Jessica's voice softened. "What if she doesn't care?" Keanu looked out at the canyon. "Then at least I'll walk into that cage with my truth. And maybe that's enough." Outside, the wind picked up. And in another part of the country, Lara stood in a circle of fighters, her hands wrapped in black tape, her eyes burning like coal. She watched the footage of Keanu training, sent secretly from a drone one of her men had flown above the canyon. "He's ready. one fighter whispered. Lara smiled coldly. So am I. Then she stepped into the cage and whispered to herself, let him come. The circle of reckoning, the road to Pine Ridge, was paved with silence and grit. It was the kind of town that didn't appear on tourist maps, hidden deep in a crumbling valley, wrapped in shadows and secrets. Keanu Reeves rode in with Jessica, riding close behind, her eyes scanning the cliffs, her hand never straying far from the small knife she kept under her jacket. She knew this wasn't just another underground fight. It was a spectacle dressed in blood and smoke, a place where people came to forget the rules of the outside world. Pine Ridge had once been a mining town, bustling with labor and dust. Now, it was abandoned, except for those who chose to live outside the law. The old mine had collapsed years ago, but the massive warehouse built above it still stood, converted into a brutal cage-fighting arena. No signs, no names. No one asked questions. If you knew where it was, it meant you were supposed to be there, or you were about to regret walking in. Keanu parked his bike outside the giant metal structure, its rusted walls flickering under the orange glow of nearby fire barrels. He could hear the crowd already, a deep rumbling chorus of shouting, music, and the thud of fists hitting flesh. As he stepped inside, the air hit him like a wave of heat and hostility. The place was packed. Fighters, gamblers, mercenaries, and shadows moved through the space like smoke. Some recognized him immediately. Others whispered his name like a ghost story. He kept his hood up, head low, but eyes sharp. Jessica guided him through the crowd, toward a back room guarded by two men with black coats and earpieces. One of them glanced at Keanu and then nodded slowly, stepping aside. She's waiting, he said. Keanu walked in. The room was dimly lit, walls covered with graffiti, old fight posters, and chains hanging like decorations. At the center stood Lara. She had changed, but not softened. Her hair was shaved on one side, tied into a thick braid on the other. Her arms were lined with fresh scars, proof of the wars she'd fought and survived. She was wrapping her fists with black tape, her expression calm and surgical. She didn't look up when he entered. You're late, she said. I didn't get an invitation, Keanu replied. Lara smirked. You did? You just didn't realize. It came with a countdown. He stepped closer. This doesn't have to end in pain. No, she said, tying off the tape. But it will. He studied her face for a moment. There was still something there. Beneath the layers of rage and reputation, a flicker of the student she used to be. But it was buried now beneath years of hurt, loss, and obsession. Why now? He asked. Why this? She looked up, finally meeting his gaze. Because you were supposed to be the one they feared, the one they followed. But you left. You walked away. And they called you wise, they called you peaceful, they called you kind. But they forgot that warriors don't leave the field, they either win or fall. I didn't leave because I was weak, Keanu said softly. I left because I didn't want to become what you did. She flinched just slightly. Then her expression hardened. Then let's see if kindness can survive in the cage. A bell rang in the distance. Lara turned and walked through the opposite door, her shoulders squared, her fists ready. Keanu stayed for a moment longer. Jessica stepped in. You don't have to do this. Yes, he said. I do. Not just for her. For me. He turned and followed the path through the underground corridor. The walls were cold metal, the floors stained with old sweat and memories. As he emerged into the main arena, the roar of the crowd grew deafening. A steel cage stood at the center, lit from above by spotlights that cast long shadows on the concrete floor. Around it, hundreds of people circled, cheering, chanting, betting. Cameras, private ones, hung from chains, feeding live streams to wealthy clients in secret rooms in hidden countries. This wasn't a fight. It was a ritual, a reckoning. Lara was already inside the cage, stretching her shoulders, rotating her, wrists like a predator testing the air. The announcer didn't use names. There were no introductions, only a voice sharp and cruel echoing through the speakers. Fight until one can't stand. Keanu stepped into the cage, the metal door slamming shut behind him. The world outside vanished. It was just the two of them. Silence fell. Lara moved first, fast and precise. A flurry of kicks, elbows, and strikes that would have overwhelmed a lesser fighter. But Keanu was calm. He didn't block to resist. He redirected, stepped aside, absorbed, and released. Like water meeting fire. His movements weren't flashy. They were efficient, clean, painful in their simplicity. She growled and charged harder. She wanted him angry, wanted him brutal, but he didn't give it to her. "Fight me like you did before," she shouted mid-swing. "I'm not that man anymore," he answered, ducking beneath a wild punch and sending her spinning with a sweeping kick. She stumbled, rolled, and leapt back up. Blood at her lip, rage in her eyes. "You're soft." "No," he said. "I'm still sharp. I just know when not to cut." The fight raged for 20 minutes, unforgiving, raw, primal. Sweat poured from their bodies. Every strike echoed in the cage like thunder. Keanu's ribs ached. Lara's knee buckled. Once, but she recovered. Neither gave up, neither gave in. They weren't fighting for victory anymore. They were fighting for identity, who they had become, and what they had lost. At one point, Lara pinned him against the cage, her fists hammering his sides. He closed his eyes, absorbed the pain, and whispered, something only she could hear. "You're better than this." She hesitated, just for a second, and in that second, Keanu reversed the hold, flipped her to the mat and held her there, his knee pressed gently to her chest. Not enough to hurt, just enough to remind her who he was. She stared up at him, breathing heavy, tears welled in her eyes. Not from pain, from something deeper, something broken long ago. Keanu released her, stepped back, let her stand. The crowd booed, screamed, demanded a finish, but Keanu turned his back and walked to the cage door. "It's over," he said. Lara stood trembling. Then slowly she dropped to her knees. Not in defeat, in awakening. For the first time in years, she saw herself. Not as a fighter, not as a shadow, but as someone human. The door opened. Keanu stepped out. The crowd roared in protest, but it didn't matter. Something far more important had just happened. He hadn't won the fight. He had broken the cycle, and behind him, inside, the cage, Lara wept, alone, but no longer lost. The price of peace, the night air outside the cage felt heavier than the fight itself. The adrenaline had begun to drain from Keanu's body, replaced by a slow, creeping exhaustion that wasn't just physical. It was emotional, spiritual, the kind of fatigue that came only after standing face to face with someone else's pain and refusing to fight it with more pain. He didn't limp. He didn't speak. He just walked, step by steady step away from the arena, from the flashing lights, from the hungry eyes of a crowd that had expected blood and didn't understand why restraint was more powerful than victory. Jessica caught up with him near the bikes. Her face was tight with emotion, lips pressed together, eyes scanning him like she was counting the bruises. "You didn't finish it," she said, her voice low but charged. "No," Keanu replied quietly. "They won't let it go. You know that, right? You humiliated them twice. Once at the roadhouse, now here. The kind of people watching tonight, they don't respect mercy. They see it as weakness." Keanu leaned against his bike, gripping the handlebar as if it helped him hold everything together. "Then they've never really seen strength," he said, "because the strongest thing I ever did was choose not to break someone who was already broken." Jessica looked away, jaw clenched. Lara might see that now, maybe, but her people won't. They'll spin it, twist it, call it surrender, and someone else will come for you. Someone worse. He looked at her, a faint light behind his tired eyes. "Then let them come." The wind stirred dust around their boots. Somewhere in the distance, the cage crowd erupted again, but this time it was different. Muted, confused, divided. Keanu had fractured something, not just Lara's illusion, but the very rules of the underground world they lived in. People came to these places to forget empathy, to cheer for domination. But tonight they had seen a man who refused to win by force. They didn't know what to do with that. Some were angry, some were shaken. Others, in a small corner of their minds, were silently moved, but not everyone was confused. Far across town, in a candlelit room built inside the shell of an old cathedral, a man watched the fight footage on a dozen screens. His name was Cassian Crux, a name whispered in fight circles with reverence and fear. He had been Lara's mentor once before she became unteachable. He had trained soldiers in silence, had watched entire organizations fall because someone underestimated the power of a controlled hand. And now, watching Keanu turn his back on the crowd, on the fight, on the unwritten code of pain for pride, Cassian's lips curled into something that resembled a smile. "He's not just skilled," Cassian murmured. "He's dangerous because he believes in something." A young fighter entered the room, head lowered. "Do we act?" Cassian looked up at the shattered stained glass window behind him, moonlight cutting strange shapes across the floor. "Not yet," he said. "First, let's see what the world does with a man who walks away from violence, while carrying all the power of it inside him." Meanwhile, Keanu and Jessica made camp in a clearing just outside Pine Ridge. They didn't want to stay in town. They didn't trust it. Too many eyes. Too many loyalties. Keanu sat near the fire, his hoodie stained with dried sweat and blood, his knuckles bandaged, the smoke curling up around his face like a ghost trying to whisper forgotten names. Jessica stirred a small pot of instant soup. "Do you regret it?" she asked after a long silence. "Which part?" "Not walking away years ago, and everything that's happened since." Keanu stared into the flames. "No. Regret comes from pretending. I never pretended, not even when it hurt." She passed him the cup of soup. "So what now?" He took a sip, the warmth settling into his bones. "Now I rest, because the next fight won't be in a cage. It'll be in the open, where anyone can throw a punch, where no bell rings when it's over." Jessica tilted her head. "You think Cassian's coming?" Keanu looked at her. "I know he is." She didn't ask how. She didn't need to. The fire cracked. And somewhere back in the cage arena, Lara stood alone under the spotlight. Everyone else had left. Her fists were still taped, but now trembling. Her eyes stared at the spot where Keanu had let her go, where he had whispered not a threat, but a truth. She dropped to her knees, not in defeat, in understanding. And then she began to unwrap the black tape from her hands, one layer at a time, as if shedding something she no longer wanted to carry, as if preparing to stand on a different side of the war. Keanu, miles away, felt it. A shift. Small, but real. And yet, for every shift toward peace, another figure rose in shadow. Cassian had already made his first move. Not with fists. With information. With whispers sent across networks, carried by men in suits and women in leather gloves. He wasn't building an army. He was gathering believers. Those who still worshipped violence as the only truth. Those who saw Keanu not as a man of honor, but as a threat to the balance they controlled. Those who would not challenge him in a cage, but in the world he lived in. Keanu looked up at the stars, and for the first time in days he smiled, not because he was at peace, but because he knew peace would be tested, and he was ready. The warrior without applause dawn crept in like an old friend, slow, gentle, honest. The fire had died down, and the sky stretched in soft hues of lavender and gold. KeanuReeves stood on the edge of the ridge, looking out across the valley, his silhouette tall and still against the morning light. Behind him, Jessica packed up the small camp they had made, her hands moving quickly but her eyes never leaving him for long. She could sense something shifting in him, not fear, not restlessness, but a clarity, a decision forged in silence. The fight with Lara had ended without a victor, but it had stirred something far deeper than bruises or broken pride. It had forced open doors that Keanu had locked for years, about who he was before the fame, before the scripts, before the myth. And now, with Cassian Crux moving in the shadows, the final chapter of that hidden past was waking up. The man who had once taught Lara, the one who trained killers not to win fights, but to win silence, was now watching him, not out of curiosity, out of calculation. Jessica tossed the last bag onto her bike and zipped her jacket. "So what's the move?" she asked, trying to keep her tone light. Keanu turned slowly. "We don't go to him. We make him come to us. You think that'll work?" Cassian doesn't chase noise. He waits for silence. So we disappear, just loud enough to draw him out. They rode for hours without speaking. Winding roads, silent towns, stretches of highway so empty they felt like forgotten dreams. Keanu's mind drifted to old memories, of barefoot sparring in silent dojos, of broken ribs healed with rice and patience, of a younger version of himself who wanted only to be strong enough to never hurt anyone. He loved again. He remembered nights under stars where he practiced kata by moonlight, not to impress anyone but to feel like he belonged in his own skin. They reached a small town tucked against a lake, its edges ringed with pine trees and mist. An elderly couple owned a quiet inn that had no website, no sign, just a painted rock that said "Stay a while" in fading letters. Keanu and Jessica checked in under false names, kept to themselves. For the first time in weeks, it felt like the world had taken a breath, but the peace didn't last. It never does. On the third night, Keanu stepped outside just after midnight. The lake was calm. The moon mirrored perfectly on its surface. He stood barefoot on the wooden dock, eyes closed, breathing deep, when a small sound cut through the silence. A footstep, deliberate and slow. He opened his eyes. Cassian Crux stood at the end of the dock, dressed in black, not flashy, not threatening, just precise. Everything about him was clean, controlled, like a man who knew how to end things without ever raising his voice. His face was unreadable, carved by time, with eyes that had seen far too much and still wanted more. "I wondered if you'd still know how to listen," Cassian said. Keanu didn't flinch. "I wondered if you still knew how to speak without hiding behind others." Cassian stepped forward. "Lara disappointed me, because she chose not to destroy, because she remembered who she was." Keanu nodded. "Then maybe you should be proud." Cassian tilted his head. "You taught her mercy. Now you'll watch it get her killed." Keanu took a step forward, still calm. "You didn't come here to warn me." "No," Cassian said. "I came to offer you a choice." Keanu waited. "Walk away," Cassian said. "Truly disappear. Let the myth of you fade. No more fights, no more cages, no more turning your back in front of cameras. And in return, I leave you alone. No shadow will follow. No war will come." Keanu's eyes darkened. "And if I don't?" Cassian's smile was small, almost sad. "Then you'll force me to remind the world that legends bleed." A long silence passed between them. The wind stirred the lake's surface. The dock creaked under their feet. Then Keanu spoke, quietly but firmly. "I don't need the world to remember me. I don't even need to win. But if you think, for 1 second, that threatening the people I've trained with and the ones who found peace in fists they no longer use will make me run," he stepped even closer, "then you've forgotten who you trained." Cassian's expression didn't change, but something in his stance shifted. Barely. "So be it," he said. Then he turned and walked into the trees. Keanu stood there for a long while, and he knew. The war wouldn't come tomorrow. It wouldn't come in a cage or a ring. It would come when he least expected it. Through betrayal, through whispers, through men trained like ghosts. But he also knew something else. It wasn't his fight alone. The next morning, a message arrived. Lara had sent it. Simple words, but heavy with meaning. "I understand now. Tell me where to be." Others followed. Old students, former rivals, people who had been changed by him in ways he never knew. One by one, they reached out. They weren't forming an army. They weren't preparing for violence. They were building something different. A wall. Of resilience. Of remembrance. Of those who believed strength was not in destruction, but in protection. Keanu Reeves stood in the center of it all. Not as a hero, not as a fighter, not even as a black belt, but as a man who chose not to be defined by his power but by what he did with it. And when Cassian finally came, not with noise but with silence, he found not a man waiting to strike, but a man unshaken, a warrior without applause, and that above all else was what broke him.